Hello and welcome to Let's Talk Diz, a show that gives you everything you need to know to help make your Disney vacation as magical as can be in just about 20 minutes. I'm your host, Jeff Coviello. With me each week is Disney Master Sandy from Easy Diz by Instant Impressions Travel Services. Sandy, how you doing this week?
I am doing amazing.
I feel like every time we record this, you're fresh back from somewhere, but legitimately, you are fresh off of an incredible experience where you were on an Adventure by Disney experience to Norway this particular time. So welcome home.
Thank you. And I am now hopefully almost my full 6 hours adjusted back from Norway. That is the hardest thing for me with international travel, is those big time changes.
I mean, I've never obviously done an Adventure by Disney. For folks that have heard our shows before, we talk about them pretty frequently. But, talk to me a little bit about, I guess, your first impressions.
I was a little nervous going on to this adventure, I'll be honest. Those who've talked to me about travel and talked to me about favorite destinations, I mean, that's always something we talk about.
Sure.
And I say Norway has been the favorite country that I have ever visited. And Budapest is my favorite city that I've been to. Mm-hmm. And, you always have vacation memories. And I think you always kind of put anything negative out of your mind. But when you're going back somewhere with that level of expectation, you wonder, is it going to live up? And I was last in Norway in 2015. I was on the first ever Disney cruise into Norwegian ports. And that was a spectacular trip, not only because I fell in love with the country of Norway, but the Norwegian people were so excited to have Disney. So going back, I was looking forward to it, but I wanted to make sure that it really was everything I thought it would be. And I have to say, Norway should be on everybody's bucket list. It is just a beautiful country, so incredibly serene, and fjords and waterfalls, and absolutely amazing. The Norwegian people are phenomenal. They care for each other. They care for their visitors. They have a love for their land and their country. And they have a great respect for the world. We were in villages that when it's not tourist season, 80 people live there. I think there's more than 80 people on my street.
I was going to say,
let alone...
all of this sounds so much like New Jersey where we live. It's just, it's like they picked up New Jersey and moved it over there.
But interestingly, everywhere I went, there were 3 garbage pails so that you separated your recycling. They have the largest amount of e-cars, and not just e-cars, but we rode on e-buses and e-minivans. They're really all about the environment without being in your face and annoying about it. They just care for everything. The only thing that's a little disappointing in Norway, and it's really Europe as a whole, is they are extremely behind the U.S. in ADA compliance. Mm. My first hotel, I walked down the hall and I'm like, wait a minute. Are there actual stairs in the hallway of my hotel to get to my room? Like I had to step up 3 steps to get into my hotel room.
So depending on your traveling party, that's a big deal.
Yeah, there are lots of places that are not accessible by elevators or ramps. They're strictly steps, and a lot of steps, but so worth it to see this incredible country.
So I mentioned it as we started that we've talked about Adventures by Disney a couple of times. We pick up new listeners constantly. So for anybody that's really unfamiliar with it, or anybody that hasn't listened to any of our Adventures by Disney shows before, give us a little bit more background so we have a jumping off point before we talk about this particular adventure.
I'd love to, and I would say to you that there's no way I'd hold to my 20 minutes or less, because I can talk about Adventures by Disney in general and why I love them for hours on end. So I'll give a quick little plug, and then in the show notes, we'll drop the links to our other shows. They are not theme park based, except for 3 of them have a theme park add-on. But they go to over 50 bucket list destinations on all 7 continents now, so even Antarctica. They have 4 types of trips. This one that I was on was what we call a land adventure. So you'll see lots of different cities, and you may move around by boat, by motor coach, or by plane. In addition to land adventures, they do river cruises, which, again, we have several shows on. I've loved my time on the rivers. They have expedition cruising, which I have not done yet. I will do my first expedition cruise in June of 2024 out of Venice, going to Montenegro and Croatia. But we did have a show. We had my dear friend Mike Ranero on talking about the trip. He and his wife Leanne took the expedition to the Galapagos. And then the last type of trip they have is what we call a short escape. Instead of being 7 to 12 day trips, they're 2 to 3 nights. There's one in Disneyland and then a couple of European cities. There's Rome, Paris, London. So quick little add-ons that are great before an adventure by Disney, before a non-Disney trip to Europe, or most of the dates coincide with a Disney cruise out of those ports. And again, it's small group guided travel. There are adult exclusive departures, family departures, and it's really all of the style and service and storytelling that we all love about Disney. So I promise an adventure by Disney will not disappoint.
This particular adventure by Disney was Norway. As you mentioned, you were talking about the Norwegian lands, the Norwegian people. So tell us where this particular adventure began.
It began in Bergen, Norway, which is actually home of a UNESCO World Heritage Site down on their wharf. Again, one of the things we miss in this country that Europe is filled with is these UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Old cultural things that are protected and so worth your time to go see, and incredible architecture. They start in Bergen because it is a little bit more easily accessible, but I highly encourage everybody to arrive a day early. The adventure itself doesn't really spend a lot of time in Bergen. You arrive, you meet your fellow adventurers, you do your welcome dinner, and you head out. And Bergen itself has so much to offer that between the city, the time change, and if you were unlucky like me and your luggage didn't make it when you did, a pre-night is really a blessing. So enjoy this beautiful city. It's an incredibly walkable town and a lot of fun to get started.
Okay, so once you get there, where does it go?
So as I said, we start literally once you begin your adventure, they're going to take care of you. You're meted at the airport, you're whisked away to that hotel in Bergen, and the next morning we leave our bags outside our room. They gather our bags, get them on the motor coach, and we were off to Voss, Norway, where we did one of my favorite activities. As lacking in athleticism as I am, I talk about river rafting as one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. And Voss was no exception. Disney really works on their rafting very carefully. Typically class 1 and class 2, so slower moving, but enough movement that you feel the thrill. They always make sure that they're going in the direction that the current is going. So realistically, even if you never paddle, you're going to get where you want to go.
Sure.
Every boat that goes out has a raft guide. These are not our adventure guides. These are river specialists that raft this river multiple times a day, every day. They know where you're going. They're going to be your rafters. I will say, every time I go rafting, there's somebody on my trip who isn't sure about rafting.
Sure.
And every time I talk them into it, tell them they will love it as much as I do. And I am clearly like the curse of the rafters, because every time that is the only boat that gets stuck on a rock is the one where I have assured the person they will have the time of their life.
Sure.
Thankfully, even being stuck, they all come off of it laughing and smiling and exhilarated. So much fun. You can stay in the raft, or there are opportunities to get out. So swimming and playing games, running around the raft, just so incredible to really feel everything. And there's just something so peaceful. There are times where they say paddles up, and everybody's paddle is up, and we are literally just floating down the water. Even though there's a road nearby, it's not very frequently used. And you're kind of in this valley watching the mountains and the fjords, and in some spots seeing maybe a tip of the glacier. Just feels like you're away from everything and really taking it all in.
That's very cool. All right, what else?
Our next day was amazing, probably the top day of the trip for me. We headed out on what they called a fjord safari. And I've done a rib boat before in Norway back in 2015. It was an amazing experience in what I got to see. Comfort-wise, it was really lacking. This one was incredible because even though it's summer out in the fjords, and especially should anything happen and you end up in the water, it is cold. So we suited up as if we were off to go snowmobiling. We had goggles that fit right over our glasses and everything. You kind of wonder what you're heading out to, because the spot that we were in, there was actually a cruise ship docked. Sadly not Disney, but we'll allow the unnamed line to share our water with us.
Sure.
And so, this big boat came in, and you're wondering, we're going out on these little high-speed boats, and you're wondering what we're going to see. But probably about 8 minutes out, we really entered what I call the land of the waterfalls. Again, Norway has more waterfalls than any other country, and they're coming down the mountainside. And we even got to see some wildlife. There were some sea otters in the water that we got to peek at. Our group actually had 4 safari boats in order to fit everybody. And we were learning all about that area as we headed out. We learned about the baby goats of Underdal. They do goat farming, and goat cheese is huge there. The brown cheese is a huge Norwegian thing, and kind of like chocolate milk doesn't come from chocolate cows, brown cheese does not come from brown cows.
That was my question. You answered it. That's good.
No brown goats, but literally hundreds of goats that they set free to roam the mountain. Those goats help, eat the grass and tend to the land, and they come back at night and they kind of roam around and they do their own thing. About 45 minutes into our safari, we docked in the town of Underdal. And when you pull in, you definitely see this town was the major inspiration from Frozen. If you've seen the movie, you pull in and the landscape is just calling out to you. That's where it is. We head off of our safari boats. We take a small hike up a little waterfall, and we get the chance to see our very first Stave Church. And the Stave Churches are really steeped in the history, these tiny little churches. We learn that they fit every person in town in church. And most of them seated 30 people, 40 people. Some of the Stave Churches seated no people. They only had standing for church ceremonies. But these things are so old, some of them 800, 900 years old. Sadly, like so many other things, there have been many of them that are burned down, and they've become a prime target for vandalism. So even though many of them have no electricity and only count on natural light, surrounding them some pretty high-tech cameras and security systems to make sure that these areas are saved. One of the things that I love about Adventures by Disney, when you're doing a land-based tour like we were, it's all small groups, so a maximum of 40 people. And with that 40 people, you're going to have 2 adventure guides. They're going to be with you from beginning to end. And then in each city, you often get what we call a step-on guide, a specialist for the fjord, a specialist for the Stave Church. And one of the unique things is typically one of your guides is going to be from the US. All of your guides are going to be trained by Disney. But that second guide is going to be from the country you're touring. And I've made some incredible local guide friends. I've driven past some of their houses, but Lisa, our local guide, just her love of the country came through, and her family's love of the country. As we were heading back on our fjord safari, we kind of stopped, and I'll put this picture up on our Facebook channel. You should check it out. Really cool. We kind of, what I would call in the lake community that I live in, we rafted up, as we call it. All four of the boats came together. They tied them together. One of the raft guides got up and spoke about the country. But then Lisa got up and spoke. And she went to the front of the four boats and started to speak. And she said, if you all just give me a minute, I need to say hello to my dad. Now, I'm not great with distance, but I'll tell you, we were at least a mile from shore. But it was dead. The water was pristine. You could see the shore town. And Lisa yells out, hello, Papa! And he answers and is waving the Norwegian flag back at all of us. You know, she points to where her house is, and we can see her dad waving. And he's so excited to be this honorary member of our group and to share their hometown with us. And I think that really gives you an idea that even though this is Disney, and I talked a minute ago about storytelling, they're not creating stories. They're telling the authentic story. They're sharing the history of the land. That her dad came out to kind of greet us from a distance was amazing. The next day, as we left town, we drove through, not quite past her house, past where her mother worked, past where she went to elementary school, and she shared all of those things with us. Later in the trip, she was also sharing with us the special dress of Norway, those kind of costumes like you would see in the gift shops in Norway, or true Norwegian outfits that they receive for their confirmation and they wear for special occasions. And she shared with all of us a picture of her and her two sisters to show us that even though they are very, very similar, it's based on what village you live in, how they're designed. She went over all the differences. So kind of cool that she brings her family into it. So welcoming and such nice people, all happy to bring you in and have you love their culture like they do.
Well, and I think whenever you talk to anybody that goes on a trip like this, one of the best things that you can have is to experience the authentic way that the people that live there are living there. So to have somebody that's planted there by Disney who shared all those things with you, like that's such a unique and authentic experience. You mentioned the church, and you said the first church we went into, so I know that it wasn't the only one. Talk a little bit about that before we go on for the rest of the itinerary.
You bet. We saw several of the Stave Churches. We actually did a whole little, I guess workshop is probably the right word, in the Viking Museum, all about the design of the Stave Church. But we had the opportunity to go into the church, and I'll give you my two hashtags that I used on the trip, and it was not Epcot and the real Norway. Because those of you that have been to Epcot and been to Norway, they have a Stave Church as you enter the Norway Pavilion. And at first glance, it looks 99% similar to the Bergen church that we went and toured. You know, you can see my picture of me in Norway and me in Epcot, Norway. And again, that's the authenticity of Disney and Epcot. But, you know, to actually be in that spot and touring those things and getting that real bit of Norway was just amazing.
Let's go through the rest of the itinerary, albeit briefly, I suppose, because there's just so much to talk about. We could talk for days. But give us, I guess, the rest of the itinerary for folks that their appetite is ready for the rest of it right now.
You bet. We head over to Geiranger, again, a town that you might see from a cruise port. Here we stay in the Hotel Union, a very different view than the cruise port. We are up high on the mountain looking down. And at this point, we're about halfway through the trip. The hotel has incredible fjord views. My room had a fjord view. Out back, there's we'll call it a hot tub. It wasn't quite as hot as I'm used to. But you could sit in this tub that probably holds about 60 people. It's ginormous. Overlooking the fjord. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah.
The hotel, also, we had a free afternoon, a phenomenal spa. It has a car museum inside. We learned all about the history of why they have this car museum and what the people of Geiranger did to save these cars when war had broken out. There's a great game room for kids there. Just a beautiful area. Many waterfalls to hike. We were across from the Norwegian Culture Center. The next morning, we went to the Westers Farm. You had the option of a pretty energetic hike up the mountain to the farm, or many of us opted for that e-bus that took us up. When we got up to the farm, he explained farming life to us. We all got a chance to help cut the grass with the original kind of tools that they use and meet the goats that they had. It turned out that the farmer, who is a fourth generation on that land, not only is a farmer, he was our e-bus driver. The e-bus he borrowed from the school, because during the year he's the school bus driver. And he's also a volunteer fireman if you have a fire.
Well, he's got it all covered.
He does, but to realize that there are still people who live this super simplistic life and love it and kind of think about all the benefits to it. From the farm, there were 2 hikes. You could take up from the farm to a waterfall, out from the farm to where some of the goats were kind of hiding, and to an alternate view of the fjord, and then an optional hike back down to our hotel or the bus down. I will say one of the things about summer is it is a rainy season, so we experienced lots of rain, but thankfully our guides were phenomenal and still made everything work for us.
So I know you got a couple of days left. What was the second to last day?
We've got 2.5 days.
Yeah.
We went to Lake Leon just for a relaxing day. And it's interesting, Norway, getting around can be a little tough. You either have to go over the mountains, which can be hours, drive through a tunnel. They have more tunnels than anyone. They have the world's longest tunnel in Norway. The joke is that the guides and some of the guidebooks that you'll read refer to it as the disco tunnel. Apparently, it's been deemed that blue lighting helps keep you awake. And because the tunnel is over 10 miles long, they were afraid the drivers would fall asleep in that dark environment. So every so often, they kind of have these blue flashing lights.
Oh, man.
Just to make sure you're awake. And in true style of our guides, disco fever came on every time we hit the blue lights. But the other thing they have, you'll be looking at a GPS, because they do have those, or a road map, and it looks like you're traveling along this road when all of a sudden, it's not really marked pretty well on the map. You essentially go through the equivalent of Easy Pass or a prepaid highway toll, and you board a ferry with your car to get you across to the other side of a fjord or a lake to save you, an hour trip around the mountain.
Wow.
So we took the ferry boat. We headed over to Lake Leon, where, again, you had your option of what you wanted to do. Honestly, some people sat in the sun at a picnic table and read a book or played cards. But there was hiking you could do, bike riding, a guided bike ride up to a waterfall, canoeing, kayaking, and even fishing off of 2 different boats that we had. And the fish that we caught, we brought back in, and they were used to serve lunch for tomorrow, where we were able to enjoy a fish lunch from those that were caught yesterday.
That's really cool. All right, I think the final day of the entire extravaganza. Talk to us about how we wrapped it up.
I will say our final day was long. I wish Disney added one more day to this tour. And as we all know, Disney does surveys about everything, so I put it in my survey. But Disney, if you're listening, we needed one more day. We spent almost 6 hours on a motor coach. Normally it gets broken up with a train ride in between, but I had arrived in Norway just after some major flooding had occurred in the country. So part of the train track was underwater and the trains weren't running. One thing about Adventures by Disney, they do a great job of breaking up your transportation. So even though it was 6 hours, we never do 6 hours straight. There'll be stops every hour and a half or two, someplace to get out, stretch your legs, see something unique, have a meal. We did a great evening, wonderful food, new friends and old at the end of your adventure. And they always put on a phenomenal slideshow. And they start with day one and the arrivals, and everybody in the room says, that was just this week. You pack so much in. And I think that's one of the things that I really love about Adventures by Disney is that I say that I believe that I gain hours in every day because I'm not planning, I'm not waiting on transportation, I'm not turning left when I should be turning right. Everything is laid out perfectly. And so you do get to do so much without feeling like you're running nonstop because there is downtime, there is rest time. And one of the things that Disney definitely works very hard for is to make sure that you never get hangry. So we eat 3 meals a day. I would say most days we had at least 3 snacks a day. They are constantly providing snacks and water, and it's all included. And while the price tag for an adventure sometimes can be a bit high and a little bit of sticker shock at first, I didn't reveal all of their secrets tonight, but the items, when you actually go back through, forgetting the experience, all of the inclusions make it worth every penny.
Well, you've sold me. It sounds like an incredible trip. Before we say goodbye today, any last notes that you want to say in case people are curious about this particular adventure?
One of the things to know about Adventures by Disney, if you're a Disney Vacation Club member, you always get opening day price. And one of the reasons that that's important to know, if you're not a Disney Vacation Club member, is that they work on a pricing structure. So even though it's a small group of only 40, the first people to book get the lowest price, and the price escalates, similar to how flight prices escalate. But if you're a Vacation Club member, you are guaranteed that opening day price, which is wonderful. Plus, if you opt to book with our agency, not only will you pay the same as if you book with Disney, one of the only things not included besides your airfare is your guide gratuities. And I will say they earn every penny Disney recommends and then some. But for booking with us as our gift to you, we'll send you a check to cover those gratuities. So a little bit of added savings for you.
Well, you mentioned Disney Vacation Club, and you know on our show, anytime we mention Disney Vacation Club, we talk about our friends over at dvcnews.com. So for more than a decade, DVC News has provided the latest news and information regarding the Disney Vacation Club timeshare program and its member resorts. Visit them at dvcnews.com, where you can sign up for their email newsletter, or look for them at facebook.com/DVC News or twitter.com/DVC News. I can't thank you enough for talking about the experience that you had there. It sold me. It sounds like a wonderful experience. Thanks again, and have a great week.
Thanks. It was amazing, and I loved reliving it with you.
And that's a wrap this week on Let's Talk Dis. If anyone you know could benefit from this or any show, please share on your Facebook and Instagram for other Disney fans to enjoy. And don't forget to reach out to the folks at Easy Dis by Instant Impressions Travel Services for any Disney destination planning. Make it a great week. And as always, keep making memories.